I'd like to ask the Minister for Environment, Food and Agriculture what consultation was undertaken with stakeholders prior to removal of their interested person status in the planning system.
On the Minister for Environment, Food and Agriculture to reply.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. Before answering the question, please may I point out that you suggest in your question that people have had their interested person status removed. Such status is only conferred at the time an application is determined and is on the merits of that case. There have been no removal of interested party status. The Honourable Member will be aware that there have been 2 reviews of the planning system in recent years, both of which have considered stakeholder involvement, or had considerable stakeholder involvement. One was by a select committee on planning and building control, which reported to Tynwald in 2016, recommending, amongst other things, that the Department amend legislation to remove third-party rights of appeal if people had not made their objections known during the application process, and that the E&I committee should consider removing interested party status completely. A second review produced the Envision report, considered by Tynwald at the same time, also suggested that interested party rights should be reviewed as a whole. Programme for Government identified that our government would implement changes to the planning system. As part of that work, there was a wide-ranging public consultation towards the end of 2017. In that public consultation, the question as to whether third-party appeal rights should be retained or removed was explicitly posed. The comments ranged widely, with some people perceiving that some individuals or groups were using the appeal mechanism simply to obstruct or delay change, which causes cost and uncertainty for developers and private individuals who have to obviously cover the cost of that themselves, as well as slowing economic development. Others felt that it was important and democratic, and that it allowed those with interests who would be affected and have specialist knowledge to express their views. Importantly, many stated that the method of assessment should be amended as it is too open to inconsistencies and seems unpredictable. The outcome of the consultation was considered by Council, who determined to retain the ability of third parties to appeal, but proposed the criteria be reconsidered. This was agreed as part of the action plan laid before Tynwald in 2018. My department then amended the operational policy in line with that commitment. The new operational policy provides for greater consistency of application as it removes subjectivity and improves transparency. Now the criteria is based on whether someone has raised a legitimate planning concern, whether the land they own or occupy would be impacted by the development, and whether the land is within 20 metres of the application site.
Supplementary question, Mr Shimmins.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. It's good that the Minister refers to the public consultation exercise, which concluded in January 2018. And he also referred to the specific question. I shall read the question for honourable members' benefit. If you think third-party appeals should be retained, should the right to appeal be limited to those people who have a genuine and limited planning concern that affects them or their property which is close to the proposed development? Honourable members, of the 135 people who responded, 53% felt there should be no restrictions. I would like to ask the Minister how he has interpreted this consultation as a mandate for the removal of this interested party status without reference back to this honourable court for proper debate.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I have not, or the Department has not, removed interested party status. We have simply clarified the situation. There has always been a question mark around who can and would be awarded, and the legislation refers to sufficient interest. Sufficient interest is fairly vague, and there is also a reference to following persons generally be accepted, generally not be accepted, and it's always been a subjective matter. So I take issue with the fact that have removed it arbitrarily. All we've done is improve the operational policy to make the system more transparent. It does not stop any party, and I repeat, any party, making representations to the planning department during the planning process. Interested party status only kicks in when an application is determined.
Supplementary question, Mrs Paul Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. The Minister said that interested party status has not been removed. However, the third version of the press release on the 15th of February this year states that the operational policy applies to all decisions from July 2018. Was the Minister aware that there were a number of people with interested person status in relation to ongoing developments at that point? And can the Minister please explain what consideration was given to having transitional provisions so that those who already had interested person status in relation to ongoing developments and had invested time and money as a result could retain that status in relation to further planning applications reflecting the same development?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. There was indeed a transitional period. Any application that had been determined and people who had, or individuals, organisations had interested party status conferred, that status remained. Any decisions, planning decisions made after July 18, when the decision was made, which is when interested party status would be granted, that is when the operational policy kicked in. Anyone that was in part of the process and had already been granted interested party status with an application that was ongoing, or maybe an appeal process ongoing, did not have it removed at that point.
Supplementary question, Mr. Henderson.
Well, given some of the assurances the Taoiseach has put forward, could he advise then how we get round the issue whereby Manx National Heritage has been granted complete status in respect of registered buildings and so on, but the preeminent conservation organisation of the Isle of Man, namely the Manx Wildlife Trust, does not enjoy the same and similar status in raising queries unless an issue affecting it is within 20 metres of its own land? Surely a conservation organisation such as this deserves far greater recognition in the work that it does.
Minister to reply.
Mr. Deputy President, thank you. I believe if the honourable member would wait for the next question, the question of Manx National Heritage and Manx Wildlife Trust will be answered in some detail. But just to give you a flavour, any organisation can object to an application or put in observations up to the point that the decision is made. People have the right to speak at meetings, which is something that we introduced quite recently, which gives them further rights to make their representations known. When it comes to Manx Wildlife Trust, if they have legitimate concerns or there is an environmental impact assessment on a larger development, they will generally get interested party status. If I could leave the rest of that to the next question, please.
Supplementary question, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President. In his original answer, the Minister referred to the action plan that came in front of this Honourable Court. That action plan merely mandated or supported the Department's aims to, I'm going to quote here, improved criteria regarding who is awarded interested person status, improved criteria. Does the Minister accept the Minister's comments that he hasn't removed interested party status from anyone, but would he accept that these new criteria have narrowed somewhat the range of people who now would be eligible for interested party status compared to the previous policy? Does he really consider that narrowing these criteria is an improvement to the system? And does he really think that the majority of people who responded to the consultation, who basically said there shouldn't be any such restrictions, would agree with his assessment that this is an improved situation?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Several questions there, or observations. There are winners and losers in planning at every stage when the decision's made or an appeal's made. It is by its nature a fairly adversarial process. I'm not sure that we've actually narrowed the criteria. What we've done is make it more transparent. Because, as I said earlier, there has always been an element of subjectivity to get interested party status. So we haven't removed it or changed it dramatically. We've just defined sufficient interest to make it a more transparent process. So when people are watching the planning committee determine an application, they will have some certainty that if they request it, they will have third-party status.
Final supplementary on this question in the hands of Mr. Shimmins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President. Is the Minister aware that these changes have undermined public confidence in the checks and balances of our planning system? He stated that there are winners and losers in planning. Would he accept that following the changes that he has done without consultation in this honourable court have resulted that developers are much more likely to be winners and other concerned people are much more likely to be the losers?
Minister's reply.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. No, I don't accept that, and I think that's his perception rather than the general public's perception. I think the honourable members should be aware that it's not just developers that fall foul of interested party status and appeals. Private individuals trying to build extensions to their houses or new houses or develop garages also have interested party status used against them to launch appeals. So not just developers. What we're trying to do is make the system more transparent and more certain. We are not removing any rights. There's always been subjectivity around the criteria. We've just made it more transparent.